We're diving into something pretty wild today.
Hmm.
We're looking at a declassified CIA document about, get this, Mars.
Oh, yeah, this one's a classic.
Yeah, it's from May 22nd, 1984. And it details a session where they're using something called remote viewing to gather information about Mars.
Right, remote viewing. Basically, the idea is that someone can, like, psychically see things that are happening far away.
Wow. So what did they actually find out about Mars?
Well, this document focuses on a specific location and time. The coordinates are 40.89 degrees north and 9.55 degrees west. That puts us in the Cydonia region of Mars. Exactly.
Seriously, right.
Well, the subject described a pyramid-like structure.
A pyramid on Mars.
That's what they said. And then it gets even weirder.
Weirder. How so?
They started describing these very tall, thin people wearing strange clothing.
Like aliens.
Well, that's what it sounds like, right? They were living in canyons or caverns, and there were these large, smooth structures with no entrances, right? And then they saw a cluster of squares that reflected light, almost like a city or something. Yeah, it could all be a product of their imagination. Exactly.
Definitely is. So what else did they see? What kind of environment were these beings living in?
They describe vast, ragged mountains and huge circular basins. Features so big they had trouble wrapping their mind around it.
Wow, that's incredible. It must be hard to even describe something that immense, something you've never seen before.
Right. And remember, they also saw that cluster of squares that reflected light. The subject even described it as being very white or reflecting light.
It's interesting that they mentioned those squares again. Do you think it could be evidence of advanced technology? I mean, if we're talking about an ancient civilization.
Possibly, but it's important to remember that we're dealing with subjective perceptions here. What the subject is describing may not reflect reality in any objective sense.
Right. We need to keep our skeptical hats on. What were they like?
Well, the transcript kind of takes a darker turn here. The subject starts describing them struggling to survive in a deteriorating environment. They mention a definite voltage reversal, although what that means exactly is anyone's guess.
A voltage reversal. That sounds pretty serious. Like some kind of ecological disaster.
Yeah, it could be. They also mentioned the beings are very philosophical.
Really? Like deep thinkers.
Yeah, and they seem to be looking for a new place to live.
That's heartbreaking. It sounds like they're facing some really tough times.
Right. And then they describe encountering an individual from this civilization who seems to be seeking help.
An individual. So they're not just observing this civilization as a whole, but they're interacting with someone specific.
Exactly. And this encounter raises a whole bunch of new questions.
Well, I can't wait to hear more.
So we left off with the subject encountering this Martian who seems to be in distress.
Yeah, it really felt like the story was getting personal at that point. Like we were zooming in on one individual's experience within this whole civilization.
Exactly. And the transcript goes on to describe this Martian as very old. They even say he seems to be waiting for something.
Waiting? Waiting for what?
That's not entirely clear, but it's mentioned that he appears to be in some kind of distress. Yeah.
So what happens next? Does the subject actually communicate with this Martian?
Well, at this point, the monitor directs the subject to focus on the inhabitants of this ancient Martian civilization more broadly.
Okay, so they're pulling back from that individual encounter and looking at the bigger picture again.
Right, and it's here that they describe these Martians as being very philosophical.
Philosophical? You mean like Socrates on Mars?
Huh? Well, maybe not quite like that. But the transcript emphasizes that they're concerned with survival, finding a new home. So their philosophy seems to be very much shaped by the challenges they're facing. Exactly. It's also mentioned that they seem to be very in tune with their environment, like they value harmony with nature.
Which makes it even more tragic that their environment is deteriorating.
Definitely a powerful contrast there.
It's a good reminder to take care of what we've got. But let's get back to that Martian individual. Do we learn anything more about them? Or why they were seeking help?
Well, it's mentioned that they're preparing for a long journey.
A journey? To where?
That's not specified. It's suggested that maybe they're going to a new planet or even a different dimension.
Whoa, hold on. Another dimension? How would they even do that?
Right. It's wild. And the transcript gets a bit vague here, but it mentions a globe that goes through something that sounds like a comet's tail.
A globe? What's so special about a globe?
Well, this one is described as being filled with images, almost like a visual record of their history.
So like a time capsule, or a library of their entire civilization.
Could be. It's not totally clear. but it's possible they're using it to preserve their knowledge as they embark on this journey.
That's incredible. Imagine carrying the weight of your entire history with you as you search for a new home.
It's a powerful image for sure. And then the session takes an even stranger turn.
Stranger than interdimensional travel. How is that even possible?
Well, the monitor instructs the subject to ask this Martian individual if he knows who they are and if there's any way to help him.
So they're trying to directly communicate with him. Wow, I wonder what happens next.
The subject says that these Martians seem to perceive them as a hallucination or something similar.
Hallucination, so they're not even sure if this is real.
It's as if the subject is encountering beings from a different dimension of reality.
So what happens next?
Well, the transcript ends with the subject being told to follow the Martians on their journey.
To see where they're going, and maybe learn more about this globe.
Exactly. But we'll have to wait until the next part of our deep dive to explore that.
So we've been talking about this remote viewing session and this potential ancient Martian civilization. And I gotta say, it's a lot to take in, but even if we're skeptical, what can we learn from this document? What's the takeaway here?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that it really makes you question the nature of perception, what we consider to be real.
Yeah, especially with that whole thing about the Martians perceiving the subject as a hallucination. Like, whoa, what does that even mean?
Right. It suggests that there might be different levels of reality, different ways of perceiving the world that we don't even understand yet.
It's like mind-blowing, almost.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about the environmental challenges these Martians were facing. It really resonates with what we're going through here on Earth.
Yeah, climate change, resource depletion.
Right. And it makes you think about our responsibility to protect our planet.
Definitely. But also, it's kind of inspiring to see how resilient these Martians were. I mean, they were facing extinction, and they were still trying to find a way to survive, to preserve their culture.
Yeah, that whole thing with the globe and carrying their history with them.
Holding on to their past.
Right.
I like that. So even though this document might raise more questions than it answers, it's still a valuable exploration of, well, I guess, human nature.
And maybe Martian nature, too. Who knows?
True. Maybe someday we'll find out for sure.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.